Welcome to FSD PLTV, where you can learn on your time, online, anytime. This video provides information on how to prepare and share materials for distance learning with regard to copyright considerations. You're a professional, we trust you, we're in this together, and we have a plan to support you. Let's get into it. As educators, we always want to prepare the best materials possible for our students. We approach this search for great instructional material in a variety of ways, sometimes looking for last-minute inspiration online, and sometimes pulling from resources we've curated in our physical or digital filing cabinet over time. Many of us pride ourselves in creating original materials, and we often benefit from materials our colleagues have created for the classrooms next door to us. This simple decision tree may help you think through appropriate use of instructional materials for distance learning. Types of resources. First, let's identify a few simple scenarios that may help us. 1. Resources you've created. 2. Resources you purchased. And 3. Resources you found. For resources you purchased or found, let's consider this proposition. Someone else created the resource. Can we all agree to that idea? If someone else created the resource, they may have created the resource with one of two possible intents or understandings. 1, they created the resource without the understanding that anyone would possibly use it, or 2, they created the resource with the understanding that someone might want to use it, which gives us additional scenarios. 1, the creator permits the use of the resource or work, or 2, the creator does not permit or protects the use of the resource or work. We're going to return to discuss permissions later. Right now, let's talk about using versus copying. Now, we know that when we buy a book, we're allowed to use or read the book. That's why we bought the book. The question we have before us is whether we can photocopy the book to give a physical copy to our students to read, whether we can scan the pages of a book to give to our students as a PDF to read, or whether we can read the book and record ourselves reading it to provide to our students as an audio recording or video recording. These questions involve making a copy of the book, work, or resource and sharing it. There's really no issue if you make a copy of something for your personal use, a photocopy of a book page that you write notes on to teach from. Consider an actress who films herself performing a monologue for her own practice. She doesn't have to worry about copyright as long as it's a copy for herself and it isn't shared anywhere. What does copyright actually mean? Copyright is a term that applies to making copies which are shared or made available to others and intends to protect the owner of the copyright or the creator of the book, work, or resource. Consider the following. Here are some definitions of copyright. 1. The legal and exclusive right to copy or permit to be copied some specific work of art. Someone else cannot make a copy of it without your permission if you have the copyright to a work or resource. Copyright usually originates with the creator of a work, but it can be sold, traded, or inherited by others. Let's look at this copyright decision tree. Take any digital artifact or resource that you may want to share and consider. 1. Did I create this resource? Yes? Then post and share away. 2. No? Did you purchase it or find it? Consider scenario A. If you purchased it, did you purchase it with a license to share, for example, from Teachers Pay Teachers, or can you locate the terms and conditions statement from the owner or creator? If your license lets you share it, then go for it. Scenario B, if you found it, do you know who created this resource, and can you contact the owner and clarify the terms and conditions? Now, if you didn't create the resource, or if you purchased it without a license to copy and share, or if you found it without permission to copy and share, then what should you do? The safe practice, the recommended practice, is not to copy and share. However, there may be gray areas, and we'll make sure to discuss that later, so you know how to proceed through the gray areas. Let's look at who really owns the right. Be aware there are layers of ownership. An author may have written a book, but the publisher may retain rights for sharing and broadcasting. If the owner, let's say the author of the book, says, yes, sure, you can record yourself reading the book, but let's say the author doesn't have rights to the recordings, their publisher does. Do you really have permission? No, you need permission from the copyright owner. Consider this example from a few weeks ago. One of our computer techs reached out to Laura Numeroff, author of Give a Mouse a Cookie, and asked for permission for our teachers to film themselves reading her works and share those recordings or copies with students. Laura, the author, graciously said yes. However, we have to understand if she really is the copyright owner or not. HarperCollins is the publisher, and perhaps they own the copyright. We can clarify by either asking Laura or HarperCollins to clarify who actually has the broadcast rights and rights to film and create an audio recording. Let's look at automatic copyright violation detection. Let's briefly discuss types of copyright violation detection, starting with automatic or electronic detection. Let's take music. You might have done this yourself, or you might have seen it happen. If you upload a video to Facebook that has a music track in it, let's say you make a family slideshow and put Sister Sledge's music track, We Are Family, as background music, Facebook may send you a message that, quote, your track has been muted because it contains copyrighted music. This is an example of automatic, electronic, or digital copyright violation detection, and here's how it works. Facebook has a database of content owners, which includes information about each digital work, such as frequency, amplitude, modulation, and other audio parameters. Facebook scans new uploads, and a match in audio parameters will raise a flag to warn the user and Facebook that the content is not original. So in this case, you're being monitored by software. However, printed material or audio recordings and video recordings of printed material are not easily monitored by software. Let's take a sidestep and think about our students and their work for a moment. Plagiarism. Many educators know that you can Google a phrase to see if a student lifted a passage from a source on the internet and included it in a piece of their own writing, which, if not cited, is an example of plagiarism. Plagiarism, as an academic concern, is tangentially related to copyright, but is significantly different. As academic institutions, over the years, and particularly in response to the ease of access to and replication of materials from the internet, we have developed academic integrity policies. These are to guide us when students, and here's the connection, make a copy of someone else's work. These policies guide all of us in standardizing how we acknowledge that work. We often think of plagiarism as an ongoing concern. We accept that we need to work on educating and preparing our students to properly cite and give credit for work which they use in a work of their own. Now let's look at copyrighted material in an educational setting. Consider the following examples to help you better understand and apply best practices. Ask yourself, did the creator intend to make money from this work or resource? Am I taking away income from the creator by making copies of this work or resource? If the answer is yes, then do not use the resource by making copies. One example might be, I purchased a copy of a book for myself to read. Then I scanned the book and made a PDF to share with my students instead of buying them individual copies. This would be taking away income from the creator. We will discuss more specific examples of this for shorter works or excerpts when we get to fair use. Next, ask yourself, can I share the copies in a way that does not share the copy beyond the classroom? If you post resources on a private or closed site just for your students, are you breaking the law or violating copyright? Some examples of a private or closed site might include Google Classroom or Seesaw. Some examples of a site that can be made private but also might be public are PowerSchool Learning, Google Drive, Google Sites, or Nearpod. Let's acknowledge that this may be a gray area. We will return to the idea of gray area materials in instances later. Next, ask yourself, am I clearly not trying to make money or profit from the copies? Ask yourself, is the copy strictly for educational use and not available to anyone beyond your students? Let's introduce a new theme at this point, permanence in the curriculum. Ask yourself, is this, meaning the inclusion of the copy, the teacher's idea or included by the institution's direction, meaning is it part of the curricular program at a school site? Also ask yourself, do I intend for this to be a part of the curriculum on a repeated basis? Hopefully you're seeing a pattern emerge through these questions. You will get more clarification on these patterns when we get to fair use. Right now, let's ask ourselves, where can we obtain images, music, and text that are okay to use? Often, creators label materials with permissions when they post them, sell them, or share them, and you can use some tools online to help you find materials that are labeled as acceptable for use. One such resource is Creative Commons. The search function of Creative Commons can be particularly useful, allowing you to search for materials that are acceptable to use. Google has advanced search functions that allow you to identify the permissions. Picsforlearning.com And resources that are identified as public domain are also good ways to find resources that are okay to use. Now let's look at fair use. Fair use is the right to use portions of copyrighted materials without permission for purposes of education, commentary, or parody. Fair use makes provisions for teachers to use parts of printed text with specific restrictions for educational purposes, even if the material is copyrighted. Some excerpts are okay to use in the classroom, even if they're copyrighted. For example, a complete poem if it's less than 250 words, or an excerpt of not more than 250 words from a longer poem. Another example is a complete article, story, or essay if it's less than 2,500 words. There's more to explore with regard to fair use. Another example is recording and showing television programs. There's the 45-day rule. TV programs recorded can be used in class within 10 days of the recording, but must be destroyed after 45 days. After 10 days, teachers are only allowed to use it for evaluation purposes, that is, deciding whether to keep it in the curriculum. To keep it as part of the curriculum, you must obtain permission from the copyright holder. Remember this concept of permanence in the curriculum. If you're going to keep something as part of the curriculum, you will need to obtain copyright permission. Let's talk about the gray area. We hope that this discussion has been helpful to familiarize yourself with some of the issues we should attend to when using materials which we did not create. There will be gray areas, of course. Let's introduce some questions to help guide us through the gray areas. If we cannot establish a clear right to use materials in our classroom, either traditional classrooms in the physical sense or distance learning environments in the digital sense, how do we make sense of the gray area? The bottom line of this may be, how do we avoid the expense and liability of a lawsuit? Ask yourself, did I need to use or copy this particular resource? Did I consider other options? Did I try to contact the owner or creator and obtain the rights to use? Was the clear and primary benefit educational use for a limited time for only my students? Next, let's look at educating ourselves on copyright. Remember when I talked about the software that automatically monitors uploaded music on some platforms for copyright? The truth is that most materials that we use with students are not monitored this way. It's up to us to know how to use materials and to monitor our own use to make sure we're teaching with best practices with respect to copyright. Now, at this particular moment, when we are all delivering instruction via distance learning, we may find ourselves wanting to copy and share material outside our traditional physical classroom. We must educate ourselves, embrace the fact that this education is ongoing as technology changes. To quote Maya Angelou, do the best you can until you know better, then when you know better, do better. We're committed to being educated and thoughtful about appropriately using materials as professionals in a changing field.